You're starting your new job all wrong. Most of the time when people give you advice about starting a new job, they talk about you have to prove your worth and you have to deliver quick wins. Well, frankly, I think this is crap advice. And in this video, I'm going to give you a different perspective. I'm going to talk you through the most important things to focus on when you start a new job in communications based on my experience over the years. And guess what? Quick wins doesn't feature on my list at all. Have you got your coffee ready? Let's go. First things first, can we just acknowledge that starting a new job is really hard? It doesn't matter how expert you are in your field. It doesn't matter how senior you are. When you start a new job in a new company, those first couple of days and weeks are really hard. It is nerve-wracking and it's full of anxiety. You want to make a good impression, right? You've gone through a lot to get here. You've gone through the application process. You've gone through the interviews. Maybe you've had to do a presentation, but you've got the job you wanted. You're in your dream role and now you want to nail it. You want to make an amazing first impression when you join. You also want to make sure that you can deliver incredible results and to prove that, yeah, you were a great hire. But where do you start? Because there's so much to learn when you're new. You need to get familiar with the company, with the product, with the culture, with the leaders, the internal values, with how things are done, with all the processes and procedures. You need to learn the business from the inside out, and you want to do this at a reasonable pace so you can get up to speed as fast as you can. It feels like a lot of pressure, doesn't it? I know how it feels. I've been through it all. I've moved communications jobs loads of times. I've worked in financial services, I've worked in policing, I've worked in the charity sector, I've worked in the tech sector. But every time I moved jobs and moved companies, it did get a little bit easier because over time I figured out some practical tips and tricks that I'm going to show you today that just make that adjustment easier to get through. So that's the good news. It does get easier and there are things you can do to make it less stressful. If you're enjoying this video so far, by the way, and this content is useful, do me a favor, will you hit that subscribe button? I know that 81% of people who watch my videos aren't subscribers yet, and I have this like super lofty, ambitious goal of getting to 10,000 subscribers. So go ahead and hit the button now. Just before we jump into the practical tips, there is something that I want you to know. When you start in a new company or a new role, and everything feels new, it's really hard. And sometimes you can start second guessing yourself. You're second guessing your own skills. Maybe you're questioning your own competence because you don't understand how everything works. That is totally normal. And what I want you to remember is that this newness where you don't understand everything is actually brilliant because you are bringing a pair of fresh eyes into the company. You are bringing objectivity and you can see things in a way that they won't see because you are new and you haven't gone native yet. So you will probably spot things that the rest of the team won't see, or you'll find ways to make improvements that other people don't notice because they've just been there for ages. So I want you to really relish this objectivity, this feeling of being a fish out of water, of not understanding everything. Enjoy it. You won't have it forever. It's actually a really good advantage. So just feel comfortable being uncomfortable when you start. It's okay. All right, time for the practical advice. My first piece of practical advice is to understand the business. So your first job when you start a new communications role is nothing to do with communications. This is the bit that communicators love to skip. But when you start a new job, the most important thing for you to focus on is to begin to understand the business. So what does that look like? You want to start gathering as much information and detail as you can about the company's vision, mission, strategy, and values. So why does that company exist? What's it trying to achieve? The plan for the next couple of years? This is your starting point. So read as much as you can. Take notes of things that aren't super clear or maybe that seem contradictory in different documents. Get really, really curious about finding out as much as you can about the business. And don't be shy to write out a bunch of questions of stuff that you don't really understand and bring these to meetings and conversations you're having with different people about the business and ask them. Just get super curious. So really your aim here is to get as much clarity as you can about the big picture of the business, about the strategy, where the organization is going, because then after that you'll be able to start thinking about how does communication fit into this and how is communication going to add value at this high level. So you can start to get a deeper understanding of the strategic priorities of the business. Now, these are called different things in different companies. They might be called strategic priorities, they might be called strategic goals, they might be called strategic pillars. There's probably 3, 4, 5 things at a really high level that your leaders are really trying to drive in the business. These might be things like make more money or get more market share or reduce the number of customers that are leaving or have a higher net promoter score for your customers. These are the things that everyone in the company is trying to achieve. So you absolutely must get familiar with this. And a great way to start getting into how different departments are collaborating or driving progress towards these goals is to have meetings with different leaders in different departments. So you might want to have a conversation, for example, with the chief marketing officer and see how is marketing helping to drive results towards these goals. And in the course of these curious conversations, you're going to start getting your first indications of how communication can really help the business. Your spidey senses will start tingling when you start hear leaders saying things like, well, we're trying to achieve X, but collaboration between teams is a problem, or we're trying to achieve Y, but there seems to be competition between members of my team rather than working together. These are all signs of communication problems. So you'll begin to see during this curious conversation, this curious exploration, how communication can start to add value to the things that matter to leaders. So this is the first bit. Park communication tactics. Don't be looking at channels or anything like that. Get really curious about the business and the business goals. Practical tip number 2 is to build relationships. You see, we're still nowhere near communications tactics. You really need to start having conversations with people, finding out who are the key stakeholders in the business and start to build relationships with them. So my advice, something that works really well for me, is that you want to have these meetings, but you want to go into these meetings just really in listening mode. You really want to start building up relationships by understanding the other person's priorities, their challenges, their perspectives. So when you go into these meetings, sometimes stakeholders will have a big long list of things they want you to do. That's not the point of the meeting. The point of the meeting is that you are listening, you are observing, you are getting deeply curious about the business, about the stakeholders, and how you can start to build those relationships. So in these early meetings, you're kind of like a sponge. You're just soaking it all up. You probably won't make sense of a lot of things for a little while yet, but you're just listening, and you're listening very deeply and very carefully. And don't be shy to ask your key stakeholders their experience of communication in the organization to date, what's frustrating them, what their needs are. And this is a bit where I really encourage you to park this notion of quick wins. You don't want to start delivering quick wins because these are often tactics that aren't linked to any business goal, that don't have a clear objective. It's just churning out stuff. I really want you to start your job not on that foot and to set the expectation with stakeholders that you're not just there to churn out quick wins, but actually you're there to deliver real strategic value to the business. So the first 2 practical pieces of advice: firstly, understand the business, and secondly, to start building really good, trusting relationships with your key stakeholders. The next piece of practical advice is now you can start looking at the communication system in the organization. So you're back in your happy place, you're in the comms zone. So I want to be looking at what is the system of communication in the organization right now? Is it effective? Is it weak? How is information traveling around the organization? How are we reaching people? What channels are we using? How many channels are we using? Are there any hard to reach groups of employees that are underserved by the channels that we have right now? And what kind of messages are we sending out? How often are we sending messages? What language are we using? Are messages clear? Can people actually understand what we're saying? And what are the glaring gaps that we can see that need to be filled? What are the opportunities that we can spot? All of this is where you start to really start looking at the system of communication. And it's useful during this exercise to put yourself in the shoes of different employees in the group. So think about, from their perspective, how are they experiencing communication? What is frustrating? What is interesting? What is working really well? And what's just kind of interesting about the data and evidence that you have in front of you? So a really practical way that you can start collecting data is simply to carry a notebook with you, or if you're not as old as me, you might do it on a digital app on your phone, but just start recording your observations. You won't understand why these things are happening, but all you're doing at this stage is observing them and capturing them. And it might be really simple things. It might be things like the attendance at the CEO town hall meeting is really low. It might be things like we have Slack in the organization, but it's really, really busy and people are drowning in notifications. It might be something like we seem to have 3 different tech platforms that are doing the same thing. It might be things like managers don't feel well informed to cascade messages to their teams. Or it might be that we have an email newsletter, but nobody's reading it. So while you still have your fresh eyes, you're still in this era of objectivity, just start recording these observations. These are all invaluable. Now, depending on your capacity and your resources, it might be worth investing in an internal communications audit. I actually don't love that word audit because I find that leaders get very intimidated by it. I prefer the word review. So communications review is where either you or a consultant will do a full-scale review of your communication system. So actually, if you're interested, I'll do a video on how to do that, so you can tell me in the comments if that would be helpful to you. But a full-scale review of where are we now, what's working well, what's not working well, and a set of recommendations on the back of it about what needs to change and how and when and why. So this will help you to make really good decisions about your communication system and how that's going to change. The fourth piece of practical advice. This is what I would be doing next if I was starting a new job. So you understand what the business is trying to achieve, you are building up relationships with your key stakeholders, and now you have a good sense of what the communication system is and whether it's working or not, what needs to change. Now is the time to start building your communication strategy. Your strategy should be very closely aligned to the goals of the business. So the question to ask yourself is, well, if the business is trying to achieve X, Y, and Z, how is communication going to help it to do that? There should be links between what the business is trying to do and what you are doing. Another really useful document to prepare when you're in this phase is a communications team charter. This document really sets out very clearly the purpose of the communications team in your organization. Because the purpose will be different in every organization, right? Depending on what you need to do. But team charter will set out the purpose of your team, what you do, what you don't do, that's really important, and how you can work with stakeholders. This is a really good document that you can use to have contracting conversations with your stakeholders to let them know how you can work with them, how you can help them, and how your team supports the delivery of the business goals. And you might also think about creating an internal communications playbook, like a collection of templates and how-to guides and checklists and all the sort of operational stuff that your team will need to do their job and that you can use with your stakeholders as well to help them self-serve and do some of the work themselves. Now, there's a lot in that, particularly in that last phase. There's a lot in all of this. Be kind to yourself during this process. It's hard. If this was easy, I wouldn't be making this videos to help people. These are the 4 practical pieces of advice I would give you when you're starting a new job, particularly if you're in a senior role or if you're in a mid-level role and you want to start stepping it up into a senior role. I really hope that this gives you a little bit of practical advice that will take the stress and the anxiety out of the new role that you're starting. And it is a really difficult time, but follow these steps and it'll just put a little bit of framework and a little bit of structure around what you're supposed to do and when. Why don't you go ahead and leave me a comment down below. Let me know what was the most useful part of this video, what advice you're going to implement. If you have other requests for videos, as always, let me know. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And for now, that's it. See you next time.